She told me they threatened to take her daughter if she ever spoke again, and I believed her. Richard Coleman's voice cracked as he whispered the words he never thought he'd say out loud. The memory of that moment, Lily's trembling hands, the raw panic behind her calm eyes still clawed at his chest like a ghost refusing to leave. He had closed deals worth millions, stood toe-to-toe with the most ruthless men in the corporate world, but nothing had ever made his heart drop the way Lily's confession had. That a woman had nearly died not from illness, but from fear. That a 6-year-old girl had braved the burning Texas sun every day to sell orange juice just to buy her mother time. While the powerful stayed silent. But what if one glass of orange juice could ignite a revolution? You're about to witness a story that spirals from a roadside stand into a national reckoning where one man risks everything and one child's courage wakes up an entire country. And if you stay, you'll see the moment the world changes forever because one little girl refused to be quiet. The sun over the Texas highway was merciless. Heat shimmered off the asphalt like a warning, but Richard Coleman barely noticed. His hands gripped the steering wheel of his silver BMW a little tighter as the voice of his assistant echoed through the speaker for the 5th time that hour. Mr. Coleman, the Japanese investors will arrive at 4 sharp. They expect a formal presentation. He exhaled sharply. 3 days of nonstop meetings, signed contracts, sealed deals, and for what? His eyelids felt heavy, his chest tight. He needed air, something real, something that reminded him he was still human. That was when he saw it. Just off the highway under the sparse shade of a dried-out mesquite tree, there was a wooden table covered with a faded yellow cloth. A hand-cranked juicer sat at the center, surrounded by a small pile of bruised oranges. Behind the table stood a girl no older than 6 in a tattered pink dress and messy pigtails. She didn't flinch when Richard pulled over and stepped out his designer shoes, crunching the dirt. "Would you like an orange juice, sir?" she asked, voice tiny but composed. "It's $1. Richard blinked. $1. He hadn't paid that little for anything in decades. "What's your name?" he asked, crouching to her level. "Emily." "Emily Brooks," she answered, starting to squeeze oranges with a practiced rhythm. "And your parents?" "My mom's in the hospital. My grandma's with her. I sell juice so we can buy medicine." Something about the way she said it, matter of fact, not pitiful, hit Richard hard. He took the plastic cup from her and sipped. It was warm, slightly pulpy, and unforgettable. "How many do you sell a day? 10 if it doesn't rain. Sometimes none." He reached for his wallet and handed her a $50 bill. Her eyes widened. "That's too much." "No, it's just enough. Now tell me more about your mom." Emily hesitated, then whispered, "Her name's Lily. She's really sick. They said she needs tests, but we don't have money. She's at St. Grace Memorial in East Dallas. Grandma takes 2 buses to get there." Richard stood motionless, cup in hand. The air felt heavier. He was a man used to multi-million-dollar negotiations, but this 6-year-old girl with dirt on her knees and fire in her eyes was doing something he'd forgotten how to do. Care. "I'm going to help," he said. Emily tilted her head. "Are you lying?" "No," he said. "I promise." She smiled. It was a small, hesitant smile, but it lit up her entire face. Back in the car, Richard paused. His phone buzzed his assistant again. He declined the call. Then, against every instinct drilled into him over decades of business, he canceled the investor meeting and rerouted toward the hospital. He didn't know what he was doing. All he knew was that little girl deserved more than the silence she was born into. St. Grace Memorial Hospital felt like another world. Gone were the polished floors and marble lobbies of his usual environment. Here the scent of antiseptic clashed with the quiet desperation of overworked nurses and families huddled in hallways. He approached the information desk asking for Lily Brooks. The receptionist looked him over, clean-cut, expensive suit, too polished. "Are you family?" "I'm a friend," he said, hesitating. She narrowed her eyes. "We've had problems with people pretending to collect bills." "If you're here too," a voice interrupted. Emily came running down the hall, dragging a nurse behind her. "He's with me. He's the man I told you about. He's helping my mom." The nurse sighed and waved them through. Room 304 was shared, curtain-divided, sterile. In the 3rd bed lay a pale woman hooked to machines that beeped slowly. By her side sat an older woman with graying hair pulled into a bun, whispering prayers. Her eyes were red but sharp. "You must be Rachel," Richard said softly. The woman turned, startled. Who are you? I met Emily. She told me about Lily. I came to help. You're the man with the fancy car, she said warily, standing slowly. Emily hasn't stopped talking about you. He approached the bed and looked down at Lily. She couldn't be more than 30, but life had worn her down. Her cheeks were sunken, her hands limp. What do the doctors say? He asked. Rachel looked away. They say she needs tests, x-rays, blood work, maybe more. But everything costs money. All they've done is give her painkillers. How much? Richard asked. Rachel's voice dropped. At least $2,000. Could be more. That was the cost of a single wine bottle at his last business dinner. I'll speak with the director, he said. No, Rachel grabbed his wrist. We've asked for help. They told us to wait. We don't have time to wait. I'm not talking about this hospital, Richard replied. I'm transferring her to Whitmore Medical Center. Best specialists in the state. Rachel's eyes widened in panic. That's a private hospital. We can't afford. You won't pay a cent. I'll cover it all. At that moment, Lily stirred. Her eyes opened weakly, struggling to focus. Who are you? She asked. The man who promised your daughter he'd help you, Richard said. We can't accept charity from someone we don't even know, Lily murmured. But I know Emily, Richard answered. And any child who stands under the sun, selling hope for $1 deserves the world. Tears streamed down Lily's cheeks. Why would you do this? Richard sat in the chair beside her. Because I've spent years making money and forgot what it's like to use it for something that actually matters. As he made the call to Dr. Alan Fisher at Whitmore Medical Center, he felt something shift deep inside. It was subtle but real, like a door long closed had just cracked open. Dr. Fisher agreed to accept Lily immediately. An ambulance would arrive the next morning. Thank you, Rachel whispered. Thank you for believing in us. Richard didn't answer. He simply sat there holding Emily's empty juice cup, and for the first time in years, he felt full. We're terribly sorry to pause here, but the story is just getting started. Would you have stopped to help if you were Richard? If this story has touched your heart, don't forget to like and share the video so we can spread this message of hope even further. The ambulance arrived just after sunrise, its lights flickering against the soft gray of a Dallas morning. Richard Coleman stood on the curb outside St. Grace Memorial Hospital, watching as Lily Brooks was gently lifted into the back, her daughter Emily holding tightly to her hand, refusing to let go. Rachel followed close behind, a worn Bible clutched to her chest. Richard had organized everything: private room, top specialist, full coverage under his name. But none of that felt like enough, not after what he'd seen in Lily's eyes the night before. Gratitude, yes, but also fear. A fear that wasn't just about illness. The ride to Whitmore Medical Center was quiet. Emily finally fell asleep with her head on her grandmother's lap. Richard sat beside them thinking, why was Lily so afraid of help? What was she not telling him? Later that afternoon, Dr. Alan Fisher approached Richard with a folder and a furrowed brow. The tests are back, the doctor said. It's not leukemia, thank God, but it's serious. Lily has a severe infection likely brought on by long-term stress, malnutrition, and exhaustion. Her immune system has basically collapsed. From stress, Richard echoed, stunned. Dr. Fisher hesitated. That's not all. I reviewed her file from St. Grace. She's been receiving psychological support, severe anxiety, depression, and something else. He leaned in. There are signs of physical trauma, bruises, old scars. She was terrified when we brought her in, kept asking if anyone had come asking about her. Richard's jaw clenched. What kind of trauma? Let's just say, she's been through hell, but you'll have to ask her the rest. Later in the quiet of her private hospital room, Lily sat up with effort as Emily colored quietly beside her. Rachel was knitting in a corner, pretending not to listen. Lily, Richard said gently, I need to ask you something, and I need the truth. She didn't answer at first. Then slowly she turned her head and looked at him, really looked, like she'd been deciding whether to trust him this whole time. You don't know what you're getting into, Mr. Coleman, she said softly. Then tell me. So I do. Rachel looked up from her knitting. Tell him, Lily, he deserves to know. Lily closed her eyes for a long moment, breathing as if gathering strength. I used to work for the State Department of Education in Austin, she began. I was just a secretary. Nothing important. But my boss, Nathan Cole, was. Richard froze. He knew that name. Nathan Cole was still a prominent figure, influential, untouchable. At first it was just comments, little things. Then it got worse. He cornered me one day, tried to. She trailed off, her voice catching. I fought him off. I filed a complaint. I had texts, voicemails. I thought they'd protect me. They didn't, Richard whispered. They fired me, accused me of falsifying documents, invented reports. I lost everything. Then the threats started. Notes left on my door. Strange calls at night. One day someone followed Emily and me home. That's when I stopped sleeping, stopped eating, got sick. I moved in with my mom, but it was already too late. Richard stood. He didn't trust himself to speak. He walked to the window and stared down at the street far below. Cars moved, people hurried by just like he used to. You still have those files, he asked. Lily nodded. Hidden at my mother's. Why? Because this doesn't end here. That night Richard didn't sleep. He sat in his office until 3 a.m., making calls, sending emails, pulling every string he had left. At 6 a.m., he gathered his 3 most trusted attorneys in the boardroom of his high-rise office. We're creating a nonprofit, he said flatly. It's going to be called the Hope 20 Foundation. Hope? 21 lawyer asked, confused. The price of a cup of orange juice, Richard replied, and the cost of remembering what matters. He told them everything about Emily, Lily, Rachel, about the abuse, the cover-up, the fear, and the courage. Our mission, he said, will be twofold. First, to provide medical and legal aid to families like the Brooks family, and second, to protect whistleblowers, people who were punished for telling the truth. This isn't just a charity, he continued. This is war. They warned him. It would be risky. Powerful people would try to shut it down, but Richard was already in too deep, and for the first time in years, he didn't want to climb out. That evening his phone rang. Unknown number. Mr. Coleman said, a low voice. We strongly advise you to stop what you're doing. Cancel the foundation. Forget this family, or you'll regret it. The line went dead. Within the hour, Richard had private security stationed at the hospital, his office, and even Rachel's home. But the next morning brought an even deeper blow. Emily's juice stand, the one by the highway, had been smashed to pieces. Glass bottles shattered. Words like liars and frauds sprayed in red paint across the broken wood. At the center, a note taped to a bent umbrella. Tell your girl to keep her mouth shut if she wants to keep breathing. Rachel sobbed when she saw it. Emily clung to Richard, trembling. Mr. Coleman, she whispered, does this mean I can't sell juice anymore? Richard knelt beside her, brushing dirt from her cheeks. Emily, do you remember what I told you about having a team? She nodded, sniffling. Well, your team just got bigger and stronger, and we never ever backed down. That night, with cameras rolling and reporters gathered, Richard stood beside Emily on the very spot where the stand had once stood. To whoever did this, he said into the microphones, you didn't silence her, you amplified her voice. And that voice, it was just getting started. We're deeply sorry to interrupt here just as everything is heating up. But tell us this, if you had been in Richard's shoes, would you have risked everything for one little girl's truth? If this story moved you, please like and share the video so others can join this journey of justice and hope. The wind was sharp and brisk outside Whitmore Medical Center, but the energy inside was electric. Just days after the attack on Emily's juice stand, something unexpected happened. Something no one, not even Richard Coleman, could have predicted. A photo of him kneeling beside the shattered table arms wrapped around the tearful little girl had gone viral overnight. The image spread across social media with a simple caption, "She only wanted to help her mom." He gave her a voice. The response was immediate. Thousands of people began sharing their own stories. Survivors of abuse, families crushed by medical debt, whistleblowers who had been silenced. The hashtag "Not Your Voices Will Be Heard" swept the country like wildfire. It wasn't just noise, it was a movement. Soon local news stations were camped outside the hospital. Strangers from all over the country were delivering flowers, cards, and bottles of orange juice to the front desk, addressed to Emily Brooks. One note read, "You're braver than most adults I know." Inside the hospital, Emily sat at her mother's bedside, coloring quietly, as Lily slowly regained strength. Her cheeks had color again. She could sit up for longer each day, but more importantly, the shadows behind her eyes were beginning to lift. Richard visited every morning, never empty-handed, bringing fresh fruit, legal updates, or just silence when needed. He had become something else now, not just a benefactor, but family. And then came the call. "Mr. Coleman, this is Congresswoman Helen Carter. I've been following what you've done with the Hope 20 Foundation. I'd like to propose something extraordinary." Richard straightened in his chair. "I'm listening. I want to introduce a bill, Lily's Law, a federal protection act for victims of workplace abuse and whistleblowers. Your foundation, your actions, this family, it's inspired something bigger than all of us." 2 weeks later, Lily stood before a packed congressional hearing, her voice trembling but unwavering. She told the truth about Nathan Cole, the retaliation, the threats, the silence she'd been forced to live in. Richard watched from the front row, gripping the armrest until his knuckles turned white. The vote passed unanimously. The morning Lily rang the recovery bell at Whitmore was like something out of a dream. The hospital courtyard was filled with reporters, activists, doctors, and ordinary citizens. Rachel stood proudly at her daughter's side. Emily held a bottle of orange juice high in the air like a trophy. Lily's hand gripped the bell rope, and her voice rang out. "This is for every woman who couldn't speak, for every person who was silenced. We are not afraid anymore." As the bell chimed, the crowd erupted into applause, many crying openly. Richard turned his face slightly, pretending to shield his eyes from the sun, but Emily knew better. "It's okay to cry," she said, slipping her small hand into his. "Grown-ups do it too." He laughed, wiping his face. "You're absolutely right." The weeks that followed were a blur of change. Nathan Cole was arrested and indicted along with several officials who had protected him. Survivors across the country came forward, and the Hope 20 Foundation expanded state by state, one small office at a time. The juice stand, once a battered wooden table under a dry tree, was now something entirely different. Built on the same roadside spot, it had become a community landmark. Bright murals lined the walls, telling Emily's story in bursts of color, each panel a symbol of resilience, truth, and healing. One afternoon, Richard returned for his monthly visit, pulling into the now crowded parking lot of what had grown into a full community center. Emily, now 8 and wearing a Foundation-branded apron, ran to greet him. "Guess what?" she beamed. "I'm reading Lily's Law in class. My teacher says I'm going to be a lawyer one day." "You already are," Richard smiled. "You defended your mom better than any attorney I've ever seen." Lily appeared in the doorway, healthy, glowing clipboard in hand. She now served as the regional director of the foundation. Rachel managed the supply pantry, and Emily had trained 3 new kids to help run the juice station. Later that day, Richard was handed an envelope stamped with the seal of the United Nations. "We'd like to recognize the Hope 20 model as a global framework for protecting human rights," the letter read. He sat quietly with it for a moment, letting the words sink in. It had started with a glass of orange juice. It became a global ripple. That evening, as the sun dipped low across the Texas sky, Emily stood on a small stage beside a mural that now stretched across the entire back wall of the center. It showed not just her family, but thousands of other faces, diverse, strong, unafraid. "I used to think I was just helping my mom," she said into the microphone. "But maybe we were all helping each other." Then she held up a glass of orange juice and added, "This still costs $1, because hope shouldn't cost more than that." Richard stood in the crowd, arms folded across his chest, heart full. He didn't need recognition. He didn't need applause. What he had now was more valuable than any deal, any company, any dollar he'd ever earned. He had found his purpose. As the crowd clapped and families began sharing stories and hugging one another, Richard leaned down to whisper to Emily. "So he said, if we could go back to that day on the side of the road, would you still sell me that orange juice?" She grinned. "Only if you promise not to stop fighting." "I promise," he said. And somewhere deep in the night, as the sound of laughter echoed through the center and the mural glowed under string lights, a bell rang again. Not for illness, not for recovery, but for justice, for hope, and for every voice that would never be silenced again. Now we'd love to hear from you. If a single dollar could spark a revolution, what would you spend it on? And if you saw someone selling hope by the roadside, would you stop? Tell us what you think about this story. Comment number 3 if it touched your heart, number 1 if it didn't meet your expectations, or number 2 if you found it just okay. We'd also love to know what country are you watching from. Drop it below and don't forget to tap the heart and share this story with someone who needs to believe in hope again.